Good afternoon, everybody. How are we today? We're surviving the heat?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, good. Well, it's good to see all of you. To start, what I want you to quickly do is we're going to do a think, pair, share. So I want you to think for about 30 seconds to a minute of something that we talked about last week during seminar and how you have reflected on it and possibly applied it to your current placement or how you plan to apply it to your current placement. So these could be specific things you picked up, changes in your behaviors, things that you've implemented based on our seminar last week. So think for about 30 seconds to a minute. And then when you're ready, I'd like you to pair up with somebody that you have not paired up with before, so you might have to get up and move. There will be one group of three, and I'd like you to share, and then we will take volunteers to share out. Okay? Go ahead.
Into this can I crash? Yeah. And they really like it.
Old teachers, they don't do that. They can't do that.
It's in morning class
Or in my finger or something like that.
I know it's the and a couple of times they make over, but I got to have it start to tell me that this kid looked at me, chatting, asking questions. Yeah.
So I talked to a few others.
Okay, is everyone done sharing? Okay, who would like to share out either their own, let's not share each other's, let's share our own. So who would like to share out if you think that it's something that your peers can definitely use in their own classrooms or something that you're really excited about?
Yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot. So, I shared two parts, but I'll share the latter part. So I've definitely had to become a lot more pitbull in my classroom, but
warm demander?
Yep, warm demander for sure, but something I was thinking a lot about is like in terms of accommodations and seeing the other side. I noticed that some of the students who have discipline issues, they get like very agitated and you can see them tensing up physically. So I started like doing this thing. I talked to the other 5th grade teacher who was on the other side of the school and asked her like, hey, can I send them down with a book if I can see them getting agitated to deliver to you and then have them walk back. Yeah, and it's really good. No, it's great. It's been working because it like helps them get on track. Like if they're mentally like emotionally kind of like tilted, it helps them get on track.
Physical.
They're producing something and they're helping. And you get to welcome back and be like, thank you so much. That really helped out a lot.
Awesome. I love that. Snaps. I love it. I did because of the heat. Some of you are finding that. When I taught high schoolers, it was certain times a year when homecoming was coming up, like that Friday, right? On Friday afternoon, it's hard to keep their attention right before a break. I read about something called a walk and talk. So you line up with a partner and you give them a discussion question, and they walk around a hallway or a building or maybe the gym if the gym's not being used, as long as they're not being distracting, and they're using quiet voices to discuss that question back and forth. And then you can stop them in the hallway, and then you give them another question, and then they talk back and forth. So instead of sitting in their desks and doing it, I can't tell you how much awesome feedback I got from doing walk and talks, because my students were like, I was producing different types of ideas as I was walking, and they weren't distracted by sitting in their desk because they've been sitting in desks all day. So something like that, where that physical movement activates their brain. Awesome.
A friend of mine who's a professional development, she speaks all over the country. Her name is Lavana Roth. Her go-to phrase is, if the bum is numb, so is the brain.
Good, that was a great example. Another one. Jen Carly.
I have a student who's from a really rough home life, and last year a lot of things happened, and so this year we got in this class, we had a lot of conversations with the school and how we were going to handle a lot of the situations that were going on with him, and school is really his home at this point. So we'd come in, and he was really reluctant to connect with the teachers at first, very aggressive towards other students, and I was like, I gotta build a connection with this kid. Found out he loves basketball, so in all of his worksheets, I drew him playing basketball. I write notes to him being like, you scored on your sheet today, and yesterday was the first time he came up and hugged me. He never hugs anybody. So he's very reluctant to being affectionate. Also heard he moved up a reading level, which is really rare for the first 3 weeks of school. Like, it usually takes about a month for them to move up a reading level. Like, it makes me tear up, because like, wow, like,
That's awesome.
I made a difference in this kid's life, and school's his home, so it's like amazing that it's like a family.
That's awesome. Great job. Another one?
Can I call on somebody that has something? If you don't mind sharing, Jessica, about your little relationship with,
I have one student who's he likes to be on his chair, he's always talking, he doesn't know how to control his anger, so he'll be yelling in someone's face, like after being calm 1 minute. So one thing that I do with him is we have like this partnership in writing. He loves to write books in his free time, like that's his reward, basically. Like, you finish this, you can write on your book now. So he'll write it and I'll illustrate, and he just loves doing that, and then he colors my pictures. It's just a great little partnership that we have that helps him stay focused, he's writing, he's creating something, and it just works out really well.
That's awesome. Very good. Stand. We'll do one more.
so they do a story problem every day for math in our classroom, and in the past they've often had like kind of semi-random names, or sometimes teachers' names, but I started putting the students' names in them, and they've done a lot of writing about themselves, and I've gotten to read a lot of it, so I've tried to put things in that I know they like. So I have a student, the one for tomorrow, he has 24 bracelets, and that's in the story problem.
That's awesome.
And so seeing them come in and they see it right away first thing in the morning, 'cause they do it right when they get in the door, and they keep coming up to me going, I did the story problem today, can I read it? And I'm like, yes, you can. And then they all get to solve it, so they're all gonna have a chance to see their name up.
Awesome. Very good. Thank you. Okay, so these are just small things that you've done within a week, right? Within 5 days of going, actually 4 or 5 days, of being in the classroom after that one seminar. So continue to think about the things that you can do on a daily basis, and not just with one student, but multiple students, right? So how can you continue to build connections, draw pictures of other kids' worksheets, continue to include them, work with students that, might seem challenging, but find ways to meet them where they're at so that they can produce in your class, right? Awesome. Today's topic is parent communication, parent-teacher conferences, and professionalism. So you can go back to your seats. We came up with this topic. It used to just be like parent-teacher conferences, I think, in the past. And when I was talking with Joel, in the fall, right before. And what we realized was that, there's a lot of parent communication that happens before parent-teacher conferences, right? You might already start having some of those experiences of calling parents or answering parent emails or having meetings, going to IEP or 504 meetings with parents. And so talking about this right up front, because this is something that I think you need to be aware of and to have time to really think and process before you have those experiences with reaching out to parents. And today is going to give you some ideas of how you can reach out to parents and include them in your classroom through good news, but also how to approach talking with parents when it comes down to talking to them about maybe changing some of their child's behaviors or things that they're doing in the classroom, okay? And feel free, and I told the supervisors, feel free to interject when you feel necessary. So, we're gonna brainstorm a few things. So do you have your phones? We're gonna do a QR code discussion board. So we're getting all high tech here. So if you have a phone and if you have an iPhone, you stick it up there, and if you need to walk closer, it should be able to pull up. And then a thing will pop up and you need to open it. If you do not have an iPhone, then you need to download a QR code app, which are free. You just type in free QR code app. Do you have one?
No, I do.
Okay. Oh, you have no service. This might work. Okay, so Yo Teach. So what happens is the Yo Teach pops up. Okay? Yo Teach. And this is an awesome discussion forum. So what you're going to do is enter room info. So it says ST seminar. If you type in ST seminar, I bet it pops up 9/11, because that's today's date. There you go. Click on it when it pops up. Oh, go back. It disappeared. Go back. Oh, it's slow. I bet you didn't it now. It's going. Doesn't work. The password is 2019. If it's getting to a password, go back. Seminar. Now press go. Now press go. If go pops up, yeah, there's blank spots. So now you hit the message and you can type a message. I want you to brainstorm some ways you can send classroom news home to your students or parents, guardians. So if it's up, so what you're going to have is this blank spot. Okay, sorry, I just grabbed your phone without asking your permission. Sorry about that. And you should be able to type your message. So come up with some ideas of ways you can send classroom news home to your students, parents, guardians. These do not have to be physical artifacts. They can be other ways of sending news home. And we're going to see.
Like short word answers?
Sure, short word answers, yep. And I'm going to. Is it working?
You just shoot a message.
And shoot the message. So I need to get out of here. Exit.
Yep, that's the one. Go.
So you should just hit go. Okay, so
I didn't.
okay, and actually it'll pop up. There you go. I'm gonna hit go.
Wait.
You have to put your nickname in. So just add a nickname, agree to terms. Submit password is 2019. There we go. Look at what you put up here. Phone calls. Good behavior notes. I like that. Emails. Yes. A newsletter. Weekly newsletters and seesaw. Envelope letters. Classroom blog, weekly newsletter, artwork, house visits. Joel's is blank.
Typing it in.
Positive postcards.
Oh, positive, got it.
Class dojo messages, nice. Friday folders, phone calls, classroom live stream. There's a new app. My friend just told me about her son's school uses that like they can track points. They give students points. Is that Dojo?
Dojo.
Is that
Yeah.
Dojo? Yeah, yeah.
That's
And you
Dojo.
can set it for home activities too. Awesome. Okay, great. So there you go, folks. There's a discussion forum for you to use with your, I don't know, do your middle schoolers have cell phones? Hopefully they don't, but maybe they do.
Elementary kids.
Some might do. High schoolers would have phones.
Fifth
Okay.
graders have Snapchat.
They do have Snapchat. Okay, so let's go back here. So here are some examples. Here are examples I found that we're aware of or that I found personally. There's a blog. Cheryl, do you want to talk about this? What this blog was used for?
Sure. We had a class that was going to be lasting the entire year and concentrating on Abraham Lincoln. This was the group. And so we set up a blog. And in the class, we would have 3 students a week who were responsible for taking pictures during the week of everything we were doing. And then they met with me, generally it was like a Thursday, and would write a paragraph about what was going on. And so they had at least 1 picture, they had to have, the blurb here, and they received just, you've done it, you've got the points kind of word for it. And one of the reasons that I particularly like having various students programmed to do this, you see lots of pictures and so on. And we also did things like little sidebar things, where we put, things about the unit list. Because years ago when I started teaching at Lombard, I was working with a woman who was in charge of the yearbook. And she asked me to take pictures. So I was talking to some kids about some pictures I was going to take, and one of the kids said, "Oh, I'm not even going to buy a yearbook because I'm never in it, other than just like a class picture." It was all the same kids. And I thought, wowee, that is so true in many cases. And I just made sure blanket that school, I was shooting everybody. And so did the students that I was working with. We had a whole photography group. And because we're changing this around, and you're having different things each time, they're going to put somebody they want to focus on.
Yeah.
And so by the end of the year, everybody had been into this over and over again.
That's great. That's great. And this is definitely something, like she said, your students can write their own little blog post and put a picture. The ones that, can handle the technology at that age could probably do it on their own without much monitoring. But your older students, your late middle school, I would say high school students can definitely do this on their own. So transition this to the younger grade, right? You can do student written newsletters home, right? Where they each write a little paragraph or a few sentences or even just a sentence.
You can sign, and I used to have kids sign up to be a reporter for the week, and then they
Good.
would clear the idea with me, and so a couple kids, I would write a newsletter, but they would add their little article, I guess, about a happening in the room, a field trip, or whatever they would write about. And
Awesome.
sometimes on the webpage too, the classroom.
Yeah.
or same idea.
The one thing I would say is good about checking in with the teacher on this is sometimes people misspell other people's names and boy, can that cause hard feelings.
Oh, yeah.
Or you're not, we make care, you do not, the person's whole name on it. Like
Just
Kathy
first
Lee,
name
yeah,
or-
Kathy was
yeah.
doing this, and Suzanne was doing this, and Jeff was doing it. So you didn't violate any privacy.
Right. And now schools usually have like a photo release form that their students have to be, their parents, guardians have to sign, so you always want to make sure, like I always, beginning of the year, I always highlight the students on my class list that do not have photo releases for, so that I know if I take any pictures of them, I can't take pictures of them. So
Real
keep
quick,
that in mind,
I
yeah.
would just say this too, so now I'm gonna put my administrator's hat on, just make sure that you proof what
Yes,
students
proof what they write.
write, and that it's, you're kinda like that warm demander on the editing, and just be careful, cause this would be a very easy way to get not necessarily positive information out there that, could cause problems, so
Right.
be careful with that.
There's a way that you could have students submit the blog post, but it goes to you first for approval before you just hit like approve, or you can edit and change things. So you just have to set that up on certain blogs that you use. This is, I found, done that grade school, one of the grade schools that I was a part of that district for a long time. Their administrator really tech savvy and has done a lot, and the district has done a lot to be on social media. I knew they'd probably have some type of online bulletin, but you'll see they've got an online bulletin that I don't know who curates, but they use some more, and they do one per month, so this is for the actual school. So it gives you some information as a parent regarding how to follow them on social media. It gives like major dates coming up, gives the school hours, the school calendar, class lists and transportation assignments, classroom assignment, this is a big link that you can click there, some other events coming up. Okay, so that's at the beginning of the year. And then if we go back to September, what September looks like, it's more of the same thing. Events, so this isn't specific like classroom news, but this is school news. But this is easily something you could use as a classroom bulletin, right? Okay. Another example I wanted to show you. So Steele Elementary School, I picked a bunch of different ones. Steele Elementary School and a bunch of elementary and high schools have their own Facebook page. So here's Steele's. You'll notice right now Knoxville and Galesburg, their main photo, their banner photo is get everything Galesburg in your pocket. Like it's encouraging you to download the app so that you can get the Galesburg news for your specific school. You'll see, so their first post, no, not now. Their first post is the adjusted heat schedule.
Oh, great.
Okay. Their next post, they shared a virtual backpack about upcoming community events. Virtual backpacks are usually where schools place like flyers, so you don't have to send home all the flyers in student folders now. Drop-off procedures. So they put a map for the new construction and how drop-off will happen. They highlight leaders of the week. Okay, so this is, you could have a Facebook page for your class if you wanted to. You have to remember that certain Facebook pages are public and certain Facebooks are private. And so if you feel most comfortable making it private, then you can only invite your specific parent guardians that have Facebook. But you also have to remember like access. Do those parents have access to Facebook that can get this? Okay, but that would be an easy way to do some social media in your own classroom. Okay. Rova has a Facebook page, and I've heard that they have social media interns. So they get credit for it, and the students actually are the ones curating the information. They're taking the pictures and they're putting it up here. Okay? Let's go here. So Twitter, how many of you are on Twitter? Yeah, only 1, 2? Okay, so hashtags are a big deal. How many of you use hashtags on like Snapchat? I don't think you can on Snapchat, on Instagram. You're not on Instagram. Don't tell me I'm dating myself. My high schoolers were on Instagram and Snapchat. Instagram? Instagram?
No, we had one for when you and Nikki taught that lesson.
Okay, so hashtags can be used on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. They were mostly used, I think they were mostly created for Twitter. But you can have your own classroom hashtag, or your own school hashtag, or your own district. So Team Dunlap is for the high school that I taught at, and we have hashtag Team Dunlap things everywhere in the school. They have banners, they have posters, so anything that you as a student want to tweet or to put out there on social media about a cool thing that's happening in the classroom or your sports team or a parent or a teacher, you stick it on the Team Dunlap hashtag on your own Twitter account, your own Instagram account, and it all curates into a hashtag. I've seen teachers do this with classroom, like say your classroom is 201, classroom 201. So hashtag classroom 201. So you're putting it on your Instagram, but I would say that you need to have a professional Instagram or Facebook that's completely separate than personal, okay? And that's what you're posting all your classroom stuff from. Does that make sense? Okay? Some things to keep in mind. You need to have, especially for your little ones, you need to have, and I know a lot of these elementary teachers and middle school teachers, they have specific permission slips that they send home or they do on parent open house for those parents that are there, that are social media permission slips, that their child can be featured on social media. And it also puts the information of this is public or this is private, right? So the parents need to know, is this gonna be public, that anybody can see my child's face, or is this gonna be private? Does that make sense? Okay? When I taught high school, I always made sure that, one, I never featured any of my students, because I have a professional Facebook page. I made sure none of them had, their parents hadn't signed, like, or, didn't give permission. But I personally asked them if I wanted to feature their face on my Facebook page or any of their work. I made sure I asked them in private, and I never used their last name. And I made sure that their name was never on the actual piece of artwork or artifact, so that, their name wasn't attributed to that piece of work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you really have to be careful about privacy, right, and following through with what they want you to do. Okay? Let's see. You can also have your own teacher Instagram accounts. I have my own Instagram and Facebook page that I do a lot of professional stuff with, and in my classroom I just told my students, if you want to follow along and see yourself featured, follow along with me. Okay? There's messaging boards on there so students can personally message you, parents can personally message you, so that's something to be aware of too. Okay? These are just ways to be in the 21st century with technology and sending info home.
One of the most, I was right there when the internet was all started. And one of the interesting things about putting a student's work up there is that we had a student who was exceptional in artwork. And there was something she was illustrating for a major project that the students were doing. And as it happened, I ran this piece of artwork off, and I accidentally just cut off a little bit of the foot of this illustration that was there. But it was up on the internet. And then I'm looking through various things on the topic that we had found it. I found it on someone else's spot being used, and it was being used by a professional illustrator. And I knew she had done it because we talked about the colors and so on. So I wrote back to him and to his company and said, well, this is really great, but this illustration was done by a 9th grader, and I don't think she'll have any objection to doing this, but I do feel that she needs to have credit for it. Boom, that thing was down.
Was down. So that's another thing. Anything you post on the internet becomes internet's property, right? We know that, so that's something to keep in mind. So any of your personal photos, photos of kids, photos of your classroom, that's why there are certain teachers that put emojis, like emoji hearts, over every single one of their student faces instead of blacking them out, because that looks funky, like erasing them out, right? Instead of doing that eraser mark in a certain color. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you ever seen that? They do like the fun emoji faces on each kid's face, right? Or only do, and that's why I requested, if you have any pictures of your students, make sure it's just backs or sides of heads so you can't identify them. That make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Okay, we talked about newsletter at my home. I wanted to show you postcards. So someone mentioned postcards home. So have I told you a story about how I got a postcard home when I was in high school? My mom was so proud of me. Okay, so I got a postcard home. My mom put it up on the refrigerator like for 2 years, and the PE teacher had written what a great job I did with my effort in PE class in high school. And my mom was so proud because no other siblings ever got a postcard home. And I realized, my mom, if she got phone calls, that was before internet, it was always bad phone calls, right? It was never positive phone calls. And this was like the one positive thing that came home about one of her children. I'm sure my siblings did wonderful things, but it was like the one teacher that sent home a postcard. And so I thought what an impact that had made on my mom, and also I was proud of it, even though it was a PE class. And so I created this postcard. I wanted to show you what I did. I just put it on cardstock, just bright colors. And on the back, so on the front it just says well done, and on the back it's a pre-written statement saying, I am sending this postcard to inform you that your student has done exceptionally well recently in class. Your student knows that this postcard is being sent home for his or her positive contribution to class and his or her fantastic work. Many times students' efforts are overlooked, but I would like to recognize them for their efforts and contributions. Please discuss with your student why this postcard was sent home so you are aware of their awesome efforts. Thank you, Kristen Strum. I had the students actually, I called them up. I kept track of who I sent one home, so all year, every student got one home. Every quarter, or at the end of every month or two, I would go through my list and I'd identify students. It could have been something simple, like they held the door open for their classmate. Or they helped a student that was absent, explain previous day's lessons. I made sure to have that conversation with them, and then this stimulated a conversation at home with their parents, guardians, right? Plus, for privacy issues, I didn't want to put on here what their student's name was, or what they actually did. Does that make sense? And then I just bought the little stamps on my own, and then just sent them. So I'm gonna send this around so you can see it. The way I copied it was just, I made these two, copied it front to back, and then cut them, and I just kept them next to my desk.
You know,
But that is an
I
easy
will
thing.
say about that, it won't be unusual that a number of you go to schools, especially in elementary, and that your principal, when you get your jobs, will say, well, we have a policy, we have a positive note card or positive note home policy at this school that you have to do so many every week, like 2 or 3 or 4 a week to the students in your class, and that starts right at the beginning of the year. And actually, I've done that before in buildings that I've been principal, because what happens is, when kids get positive notes home from the teacher, and then the teacher has to make that tough call, like students misbehaving, and I really need to talk to you about it, or the principal calls, at least there's been a positive comment first before the negative comes, which happens sometimes with kids. The parent isn't home, and the first call they get from the teacher is, I gotta tell you, little Johnny's been a real little SHIT, then that doesn't go too well, right? That doesn't go so well. So you wanna be positive first. That's why I spelled it. So, but it really does help, and parents really appreciate that. I would tell you too, a negative lesson that I had, a mistake that I made as an early beginning teacher, was at open house. We had open house, and everybody's there, and they're seeing the classroom, and they're interested to see their kids, a little bit of their work. It's not time for parent-teacher conference, right?
Good point.
Right? And I made the mistake of a parent came up to me and said, so how's Barry doing? And I said, well, to tell you the truth, Barry's having a lot of problems. There's this and this and that. I set myself up for a miserable year with that parent because, first of all, they pointed out to me, very inappropriate to share details of how he's doing in class. What should my response have been? Should have been, well, I tell you what, let's not talk about that. How about we get together and have a cup of coffee after school one night and we can talk about that. This is really for social and it's not, I needed to redirect, but she kind of put the bait out there and I took it.
And parents do that all the time. All the time. They'll want to catch you at parent open house, fall open house. If you're coaching or in charge of extracurriculars, they're going to want to catch your attention there to ask them about their specific student. Those are not the places to do that. The places to do that are on one-on-one conversations that are set up and scheduled, possibly with another mentor teacher there with you in case you need someone to back you up or some help, but not in those social situations.
And just even think in terms, even in terms of time. In an open house setting, lasts an hour, you don't have time to have these kinds of conferences with every parent. If you do it with one, they'll just do that the whole time, and that's not what it's for.
One thing too, that I think is powerful in that elementary school is I like the idea of sending notes home and checking off the kids you've done that with, and for a variety of things and reasons. But take them to the or now we have phones in our room, I guess, or take them to the phone and have, when the kids are out of the room, and have them call home and say, really did well on the science test that in the past has been very difficult for them. And even if you get an answering machine message, they leave the message on the phone. Hey, Mom. It's all genuine. They're so excited, and they're excited to make the phone call. And if the child doesn't do it, there's no time, and you can do the same thing. But having them come home to a positive answering machine message about the child is a big deal, or just getting that call if they're home. I think it's awesome.
Out of curiosity, this is all awesome, great, but I've lived in a lot of students who are very neglected, and also we can barely get our students to their parents to sign a form that we send home. Most of our people at school don't always have access to technology,
Right.
so it's just a very different demographic than a lot of let's make a cool blog.
that's a great question. Most parents all have cell phones, right? I'm gonna assume that, but I would say a lot of parents have cell phones versus landlines. So could you come up with a find an app, like a text app where you can send classroom news home to them where they don't necessarily need internet, they might just need data, right? But those are definitely things to explore based on your student population. I'm glad you brought that up. But yes, and I did mention like access. What's the access, right? What access do your parents have? What access do your students have? And issues of access are always things that we need to consider, especially when we're assigning student work too, right? So if we're assigning student work and you expect them to use the internet at home, they might not have a computer. They might not have access to the internet or to a Word document to type it, right? But yeah, so if you feel that technology is not the way to go, then just handwritten notes, post-it notes on their folder.
I'll say another thing too, and I saw that Steele was very impressed with this, that Steele made an effort before school started to have teams and knock on every single door and talk to every family and parent. I think that's really great. And when I was principal at Steele, we kind of knew exactly the same thing that you're talking about, Carly, but there's even another dimension to it. Not only do a lot of parents challenged with either technology or with the time to communicate with school, they're also challenged by, in many cases, they had a really horrible school experience themselves. And like, so to come to school, to have communication from school is like putting salt in the wound to them. And so when I was principal, and I think, you know, some principals will do this, I said, I want you guys to feel free to go to families' homes. And if you want to go and share something good, or if you need to talk to them about something that's happening and you're not getting communication, we'll go together and we'll go out. Because I think there is also a thing, I don't know if you guys remember that film, The Principal Story. If you had me in School and Society, you saw it. The power of visiting students' homes and letting them know that you're on their turf and you're comfortable doing that and you want them to feel comfortable. You know, there's real power in that. And teams of teachers working together, just like the Steele folks did this summer, that's really powerful to do things like that. So that's those positive communications that you just have to be innovative and understand your clientele.
You have to know the culture.
And don't give up, because it's amazing if you don't give up and you keep trying to contact them. If they don't answer, if they don't send back the form for parent-teacher conference, get on the phone, send a text, if you know that you can get them that way. But I just kept trying. I mean, maybe I'm just stubborn, but I just kept trying. Very rarely, and I had some lower demographics too, and those parents ended up coming in, and once they come in and you share something good, they come in, they'll keep coming.
You know, in that article last week that we read from Carol Tomlinson, one thing that talked about was understanding where your kids are coming from, right? The same thing applies to your parents. You have to understand where your parents are coming from, and a lot of your parents don't have very easy lives. And so we have to understand that, we have to support them. Honestly, in my career, I had this happen multiple times. Parents were illiterate. So we send a note home, they can't read it. You know, so you have to think about all of those kinds of things. And Carly, to your point, it's about understanding your community, your context for learning, that whole thing that's going on. It's really important.
When I first moved to Galesburg, I was teaching at Monterey, and I decided I'm walking the streets that my students live on. So I would just, I like to walk. So I would take a day and, okay, this is Saturday, and I would just get on my jeans and I would just walk in that neighborhood. And, of course, people were out, everyone's like, what are you doing here? And it's like, oh, I just like to walk around. And so, kids would introduce me to somebody, like, this is my brother. I played softball games with various kids, and that was really a great way to feel like, they saw me, in different places, in different kind of clothes than I taught. And then pretty soon they were introducing me to parents, and, if you met the kid's brother, and you met the, then pretty soon it's a lot more relaxed atmosphere.
And go to extracurricular
Oh,
activities.
yeah, I was just gonna say, go to flag football, you'll see all the
Go to
parents
flag
that-
football,
Me.
go to any of those activities and strike up a conversation with them, right? Just be in your normal day clothes and just talk with them. But those aren't the opportunities to talk about specific student behaviors, but just get to know them and let them know that you're there for their student.
I will tell you a humorous little story. I was standing, you've met all these people in the classrooms and everything, and I was standing in a grocery line. And I started staring at this one guy. I thought, he suddenly looked at me like, what are you doing here? And I turned around and said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be staring, but I thought maybe you were the father of one of my kids. Kids in my class. That got a laugh out of his wife. So you have to be a little careful.
Because we call everybody our kids.
They joke with me, I taught every one of their kids afterwards, and I'm telling you, they joked about that every single time I saw them.
Do you guys have, thank you for your stories, those
Yeah.
are great. Do you have that packet from last week? The last page, if you do, if you don't, Cheryl, play. The last page, Cheryl had a great contribution of ways to identify behaviors and to speak to parents about, or to the students about behaviors. And so I want to highlight this, constructive parent communication. So I think I mentioned this last week about having, starting with the positive. So just to reiterate, and this is avoiding judgmental statements. Yeah. So, this is something that you can look over on your own and practice on your own. Okay. The top of it says avoid judgmental statements when discussing behavior with students, parents, and staff members. When you begin a discussion, start with a positive remark about the student and explain what you observed that was unacceptable as clearly as possible. Describe the behavior you want to see from the student. So that's what I put up here. Identify positive behavior observations and identify behaviors you'd like changed, modified, or improved, and use specific details to describe them. Then when you're ready to communicate with a parent or a student about this, you start with the positive critique. So, I really love how Sarah is always listening to me when I give her class instructions. That's positive, right? Does it clearly identify the behavior that she's doing well? Follow with clear, specific descriptions of what you see and what you'd like changed. However, I notice when she arrives to class that she doesn't have all her materials with her. She will often leave her homework and pencil in her backpack and ask to go get them when we are a few minutes into the day's lesson. Okay, have I refrained from being judgmental and instead used clear descriptors of the behavior that I'm seeing, that I would like changed? So then communicate the expectations. I'd really like for Sarah to be more organized and bring all the needed materials to class when she walks into the room to start the day. And then end with positive. By arriving with her materials, Sarah will be ready for the school day. She listens so well and works great with her classmates, so this will really help her to start the day off right. So do you see how I've highlighted the positive again?
So could I add one thing to this? So this is from experience that I had. I'm not going to go into the war story about it. The other thing that you need to insert into this is you need to listen to what the parent says. Because very likely, when you talk to them about the organization issues with Sarah, the parent's going to say, I know, I had the same problem at home. I just see her room is an absolute mess, or whatever. Or they'll say, that's not very much like the Sarah I know. At home, she's very organized. By listening to what the parent has to say, it can help you in how to deal with, or if you're off track with Sarah or whatever. And I learned that message the hard way by being parent-teacher communication one way. It needs to be two ways. You need to listen to what the parents say. They know their child better than you do.
Okay. Does that make sense? So if you want to practice, that sheet will help you walk through and practice some of those. Okay? Okay. This is also, oh wait, I think I get to that, I'm jumping ahead. So remember, sandwich it. Positive feedback, constructive with the observed behavior, clear expectations, and the positive feedback. You're sandwiching that feedback with the positive. You can also apply this during parent-teacher conferences. I never open parent-teacher conferences with, well, actually, Sarah's really disorganized. I always open with a positive. And when you open with a positive, you see the parents all of a sudden relax, right? Because they're very tense. Think about that. As a parent going to a parent-teacher conference, it's really nerve-wracking. It's really nerve-wracking because you don't know. And it's also, you feel as a parent, it's a reflection of yourself, possibly. And you really want to, a lot of parents want to help their students be successful. And like Joel said, some parents have a really sour taste in their mouth from their own school experiences. And so opening with a positive can really help. I added those memes up there because I heard your age group loves memes. You love memes?
Bank memes.
I didn't know students your age and younger love memes until I went to a PD, a PD session, a professional development session. Everyone's like, try memes. Your high schoolers will like think you're the coolest and will start listening. So I started putting memes on all my PowerPoints and then like worksheets. My students were like paying attention and they wanted to do the stuff because I use memes. Have them create memes. So there's some fun memes. So talk with colleagues first how to best prepare for your school's parent-teacher conferences. It's going to look different at every single school. If no one approaches you about prepping for them, you need to reach out to somebody, a mentor teacher, that marital that you've identified to help you. And don't do it the day before, do it weeks before. Hey, I know parent-teacher conferences is coming up. Could you give me a little feedback on like, what is it like? Where do we sit? What do you normally prep for? What are some mistakes you've made in the past? How can I best prepare for this? The last thing you want to do is to walk in to parent-teacher conferences and not know what to expect, or not know the structure, or how much time you're going to get with each parent, because it's different. You need to prepare all materials, you need to get ready ahead of time. So that's copies of grade reports, student work, if you actually provide examples of student work, any class materials to show them of a really cool unit that maybe you did along with how the student performed. Then prepare and gather any materials from your students that you want them to showcase for their parents or guardians. So they might write a letter to their parents about themselves or about the first weeks of school or about their favorite activity. They might reflect about their progress. I do this with my students. 3 things they're proud of and 3 things they need to improve. And I have them do it on a little note card. So hey, parent-teacher conferences are coming up. I'm giving you each a note card, put your name at the top. And then I'd like you to write 3 things you're really proud of or that you're really excited about in our class. And on the back, I want you to talk about and really reflect on 3 things you think you can improve on. And then these I'm going to collect back and I'll give them out to your parents if they come to parent-teacher conferences and we'll talk about them. You learn a lot from your students when they get time to reflect on things they're proud of and they can improve on. And then ask them possibly to choose some work they want you to showcase. Some schools do student-led, parent-teacher/student-led conferences, so that's something to consider, and those will have their own structure to them.
And I would say, the only thing I would say about that, and as a principal that's worked with teachers that do that, don't enter into that lightly. It's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of prep for your kids. But I've also seen it work very well at the upper elementary level. You wouldn't want a first grader to be a parent-teacher.
Yeah, so prepare for the big days. So some of you might have multiple days parent-teacher conferences. You need to dress the part, you need to look professional, right? We're professionals, and so you need to look professional, but you also need to be comfortable. Don't wear something that, if you know you get nervous and you sweat a lot, don't wear something that's going to show your sweat. That's like me, I sweat a lot, so I tend to wear like tank tops over with like a suit jacket or a cardigan over it. You might also be in a freezing classroom. So make sure, or in a gym, or in a cafeteria, wherever they place you, or in a hallway. So make sure that you dress comfortably or have layers. And don't be uncomfortable because you're going to be sitting a lot. Bring chairs that are comfortable to sit in. Our parent-teacher conferences lasted 8 hours, 2 days in a row. And so we rolled our comfortable classroom chairs all the way down to the cafeteria and gym because we didn't want to sit in like folding chairs. Be prepared with tissues for yourself and possibly parents. You will most likely have some parents that cry out of joy, out of surprise, or out of disappointment. Okay? Mitts for yourself because you'll be eating snacks. Okay? Bottles of water, snacks for yourself, writing utensils, and a pad of paper and any of the materials you've prepared. During one-on-one conferences, make sure you sandwich it. Okay? So the positive, the constructive, and the positive. Have student work to show them and send home with them possibly. Have in mind and write down student strengths and areas for improvement, especially if you're dealing with like 120 students, the high school and middle school levels that have a lot of students. For your younger grades that only have 25 students, have this prepared ahead of time so you know when that parent walks up, you can't be like, oh wait, which Emily is your daughter, right? If you have like multiple Emilys, that's the worst. I've done that, you know, with 120, 160 students, 190 students, you have multiple students with the same name.
Probably more hit and miss too, Kristen, isn't it, as far as parents actually attending
Attending.
teacher conferences?
Yep.
At the high school, middle school level. Elementary, you can, in most cases, most of the parents do end up coming in. It might take some work to get them in, but, so you have to be prepared for almost anything at the middle school, high
Yep.
school level, because
You don't know. So I always just kept my class list with all the grades printed out. I had the student note cards in alphabetical order per period. So I first have to take my list, identify which class they're in, then find their note cards, pull it out. If they're open, so like what Joel's talking about, if you don't have assignments of when the parents are showing up, make sure you keep like a list of who shows up. So have them sign in with their student name and then they sign their name, okay? And that's usually how I know who their student is, because it might be like, oh hi, what's your name, who's your student? And they're like, Sarah's my student, and then I'm like, which Sarah? And then I just look at the list and I can see their last name. And hopefully it's the same last name. And that doesn't always happen, have they though? And also their contact for references, so they can put their email down or cell phone in case you need to follow up with them. And then if you don't know the answer, say you'll find out, don't make it up, right? If there's something that they have a question about, and you can't remember how they did on this specific assignment or this unit, say you'll get back to them, and then take a note that you need to get back to them, and then get back to them.
Couple ideas that I have is, one, it's just like teaching. The better you plan, the better prepared that you are, the more likely your conferences are going to be successful. And then the second thing is, and you will have these from time to time, if you know that you're going to have a difficult parent-teacher conference, you had some previous contact with the parent that wasn't positive, you've gotten a note or something, and you think, talk to a colleague across the hall to listen at that time. This is particularly for elementary people, to listen at that time as the conference is going on. If you think it's particularly tough, tell your principal. The principal will either like hang around the door or, you know, but be proactive about that, because sometimes parent-teacher conferences can get kind of rough. Diana, I cut you off.
No, you didn't. I think Janelle mentioned that you have a parent-teacher conference this week, you and your teacher. And I think that's such good advice, and maybe I've said it before in here about this, but if you need to talk to somebody and it's urgent, do it right away. I mean, if there are problems with somebody, why not call them in first? Because then your parent-teacher conference nights, that one is not as difficult, you've already built bridges. The other thing is, you usually have, like Kristen said, these 2 evenings, or buildings are all different. 2 evenings, or maybe a half a day and then an evening. It's probably okay, you should check when you have your own building, but it's probably okay to, if we have Thursday, Friday conferences, if I had one I knew was gonna be longer, I might schedule it in cooperation with the parents with Monday after school, or Tuesday after school, so it's the only one I have. And then I'm not like, cause if you butt them up 15 minutes apart, back to back, it's really not fair to the parent if they wanna talk to you, and you need to listen.
And pretty soon you've got a line of parents down the
yeah.
hall, which is not.
And sometimes they have to leave, and sometimes.
That's
they
not,
don't.
yeah, you set yourself up.
Yeah, it'll be dependent on your school, but I definitely agree with Joel, like if you, especially if it's an open conference, you don't know who's coming in and you're in a room with a bunch of other teachers, because sometimes administration feels like then they can supervise, right? Like if anything does happen, parents aren't in their own little rooms, or I mean, teachers aren't in their own little rooms with parents in case something does happen. Just say to your neighbor at the desk over, hey, I might have this parent, if I scratch my head when they sit down, or I like cough really loudly, can you just pay attention and listen in? And I do that all the time, especially when I know that there might be some conflict, for them to possibly go get an administrator to help me out or something like that. And don't ever feel bad about saying, you know what, right now I would really like it if I could get another person in here just to listen to our conversation. Can you just give me a minute and I'll go run and get them? Don't ever feel like you can't do that. If you feel uncomfortable, if you feel like a parent or you might say something and you don't want it taken out of context and you want another listening ear, it could just even be your neighbor, it could be the administrator, but have them be in the room with you, especially when you're a new teacher, especially when you're not tenured. Would you agree?
Yeah, and you may even have situations where the parent asks to bring someone with them. Like a relative, an advocate, or something. Like I I will say that overall, this is my belief, I would say 90% of all parents really want to be on the same page with the teacher, want to cooperate, and a lot of, it might even be higher than 90%. If you do this the right way, parents can be your greatest supporters, and most of them want their kids to do well and want them to do what the teacher wants them to do. I really think that's true.
I think most of them are positive too, you know, positive.
Also a side note, if you get really nervous before a parent open house, parent-teacher conferences, first day of school, that is normal and that is okay. Did you hear me? Right? Like year 14 last year, I almost got sick to my stomach the morning of parent-teacher conferences because I had such anxiety thinking I might have to have a specific conversation with a parent that I knew was probably gonna show up, and I just didn't wanna have that difficult conversation at parent-teacher conferences because I didn't know what she was gonna say. Or just that first year, I still remember being a student teacher and being at parent-teacher conferences, I went to the bathroom and I thought I was gonna throw up, I was so nervous. It is okay, right? First days of school, same thing. Same thing. Nervous about the new school year, not knowing what to expect. It is okay and that's normal. Don't think you're strange, okay? Okay, last slide, because we only have 2 minutes. Oh, professionalism. In 2 minutes, Joel. Can we cover it? We can. So, the importance of positive teacher talk. We already talked about that, right? That's part of being professional. Relationships with students, parents, colleagues, administration, building those relationships, finding your marigold, keeping parents informed, making sure, like Diane said, keeping parents informed before issues arise, before it becomes an issue. Embrace the challenges. That was my motto last year. I wanted to embrace the challenges rather than resist them. So whether the challenge was my students in a specific class or specific content I was teaching or a specific colleague that maybe used negative teacher talk, I told myself, don't resist it, don't get upset about it, just embrace it and figure out how to navigate those things. This goes into growth mindset. Do you want to say something about growth mindset?
I would just say, with growth mindset is really based on we learn from struggle, right? We learn from struggle. You guys chose this profession to make a difference with your lives. So accept that it's going to be challenging, and accept that this is part of changing lives, right? It's not going to be easy. If it was easy, anybody could do it. But you guys have been chosen to do it. So have that growth mindset with your parents, with your kids, with yourself, and that's what social justice is all about. It really is.
And the next point, learn to navigate the borderlands of teacher practice. So this is part of some of my research in my graduate studies and my dissertation. I talked to student teachers last year about this. But the idea that like schools are borderlands. They're these places that have a lot of tensions. Students encounter borderlands when they are faced with some challenges between the school context. You might be faced with some challenges between what you believe good teaching is versus how you're expected to teach based on a curriculum, based on teaching evaluations, based on whatever it might be, right? Learn to navigate those borderlands rather than resist them. That's why so many teachers want to get out, because they don't want to navigate. They don't want to navigate the challenges. So instead, embrace them and realize that's what it just is. You have to navigate, embrace the challenges to be able to get through them. And then be an advocate for the profession, your school, and your students. Some of you are already doing that, and that's awesome. That comes from your conversations with friends, family, colleagues, how you portray yourself in public. Also, social media. Social media is an awesome free tool to network and to advocate for the profession, to get ideas. So following certain people on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. There's so much information out there that's free and ideas for your classroom that could really help you enhance some of your lessons and meet some of your students' needs.
Okay. Thanks, Kristen.
Yeah, that was good.
So, a couple of quick things, just like technical sorts of things. First of all, we visited, Diane and I visited with your brothers and sisters up in Chicago over the weekend. All are doing well. It was really fun, and I think they had such diverse experiences, and they all said, tell everybody back, we miss them. so yeah, they're doing well. About those stressors, one thing that Kristen and I have been working on is developing language for the department revolving around what do we do as student teachers when a school district is going to go on strike. Because Chicago appears to be headed for a teacher strike, and so Alex and Bobo are both, you know, what do we do? Alex says, do I go ahead and substitute and teach him? No, Alex, no, don't do that. So anyway, so we're doing that. You guys don't have to worry about that. I don't believe in any of your settings. But one thing that came up that we want you to be aware of, and that is in regards to substitute teaching or getting paid for student teaching. State just passed legislation that said because of the teacher shortage, districts can pay student teachers to student teach. It's like, that's not a good thing. We are not going to allow you to be paid to student teach because that's just one more thing that adds to the stress and the complication of student teaching, and it's your learning period, right? Also, if your teacher is absent, you cannot be the substitute teacher. All right, it kind of goes along with the pay. Legally, they have to hire a substitute teacher to be in that classroom. Now, perfectly fine if you teach your lessons and the teacher, your co-op says, hey, substitute sit in the back of the room.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Noah, Cheyenne, whoever is going to teach, that's fine. But you can't be, legally, you cannot be the substitute teacher.
Another note about that, a lot of your co-ops may leave the classroom when you have full takeover, right? I always recommend, when I'm absent, and I had a sub, and a student teacher, I always told the sub, even though I have a student teacher, I want you to be in the room at all times, because if something happens, when I'm not there, I want there to be an extra set of eyes. So I don't want my student teacher to have something happen in the classroom and there's not another adult there to testify to what happened, or to help solve an issue, or if the student teacher has to take one student out of the classroom, there's still an adult in the classroom. So if you know that there's gonna be a sub, or a sub shows up because your CT is sick, just say, I'd really like you to be in here all day long. I need you, as per school policy, I need you to be in here all day long.
So, to the NTPA real quick. Everybody feel pretty good and done with their context for learning, and kind of talk to your co-ops about it. If you haven't talked to your supervisors about it, talk to them. We really ought to be to the point where that's kind of getting nailed down. If you want me to take a look at it, I'd be glad to take a look at it. Second thing is, has everybody been having the conversation with your teachers about what your lesson focus is going to be? Had that conversation, because we want you to have that decided by next week, both time frame and what the literacy lesson or the content area within your specific content is. So make sure that you're doing that, and supervisors, if you talk to your kids about that, and make sure that they're on track for that, I think it's important. Okay? All right. Grab some extra donut holes, some fruit, have some juice. Cheryl, I think we're unlocked across the road.
What's up?
Go to my office again.
Hey guys, we miss you.
It's gonna be so sick of it.
It's gonna be so sick.